Carly, for leading us through the prayer time and getting us to where we are this morning. We got a slim crowd today. You're welcome. Yeah, it's funny how it goes. I mean, last week, the room was full. This week, we're a little bit low, but that's all right. We're here. What's that? Yes, I'm glad you're here too.
They all ran away.
If you don't know, if you're not familiar with the document that looks like this is our monthly church financial statement. And there's one pinned on the bulletin board. There's always the current statement on the bulletin board. Usually the current one. And right now, this morning, there's actually some on top of the garbage can there, some extras if you want to grab one and take it with you. It's always, I encourage everybody to be well informed about the financial health of the church. And, you're contributing members, you come, you need to be informed about what's going on financially. And of course, we encourage everybody to continue to support the church financially. Wasn't it nice this morning to pull up to the parking lot and actually be able to see stripes and know where to park?
Yes. Yeah.
There were, I don't know if you realized it, but there were 3 sets of parking stripes showing out there before. So, but those niceties like that can only be accomplished if people are donating funds to be able to pay for it. So we have a lot of capital projects we'd like to do at the church. The next major focus that the board wants to tackle is the renovation of this room. But it's going to take money to do that. You guys know that. And right now we don't have that money. So we're developing a plan, developing a budget for that now. But we just encourage you, to the extent that God leads, continue to be faithful in supporting our church financially so we can continue.
I was going to say, I think it's great to have a handicap.
Yes. Yeah. That's good. That is good. One thing we didn't fix, and I'll tell you now before you come up here in a big rainstorm, our pond, our Forest Park Bible Church pond in the parking lot, we just chose not to spend the money to fix that in this go around. So don't be surprised when you pull up and the pond is still there.
But it's okay, because if it rains and if it fills up with water, that's your designated spot.
Yes. Somebody said that's supposed to be my designated spot. So
Okay.
I'll keep a pair of waders in the car for that. So grab your financial statement back there. All right. We're going to continue last week's lesson. Because we got to the end of it last week, and I rushed through the end just for sake of time. And I'm always wanting to get on to the next lesson, but at the same time, I feel like we didn't get to spend much time on the application of last week's lesson. So I want to go back and give everybody the opportunity to share their experiences. So if you have your handout from last week, that's great. If not, Sheila has fresh copies.
I can't find one.
Yes.
Yes,
The her lesson.
the her lesson.
And it's today. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All All right, so we're not going to go back and reteach the lesson, but we do need to review it real quickly for anybody that wasn't here last week. So on your handout, if you'll go down to the guided notes section, there's really 5 sections of scriptures that we looked at. And I'm going to reread the story, which is out of Exodus chapter 17, verses 8 through 13. And then we'll do a real quick review of the lesson, then hopefully get into the application side of it. So Exodus chapter 17, verse 8, then came Amalek and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said unto Joshua, choose us out men and go out, fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses had said to him and fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And it came to pass, when Moses held up his hand, that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. Verse 12, but Moses' hands were heavy. That's really the focal point of what we're looking at. Moses' hands were heavy. After a while, he's holding up that rod, and it gets hard and heavy, and he physically gets tired. And they took a stone. So Aaron and Hur took a stone and put it under him, and he sat thereon. And Aaron and Hur stayed up his hands, the one on the one side and the other on the other side. And his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua discomfited Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. So, the story is God told Moses to go stand on the hill, hold up the rod. As long as the rod was in the air, Joshua was winning. And Moses got tired, the rod came down, Joshua was losing. So they figured out a way, Aaron and Hur figured out a way to help Moses hold the rod up. Okay? So now go back to the guided notes on your handout, and we'll talk through these 5 things here. First one, even strong people become weary. Right? I mean, Moses physically became weary. He was doing exactly what God told him to do, but physically he became weary and was not able to complete the task. Paul talked about, let me find my references so I don't misstate this. In 2 Corinthians chapter 1, Paul talks about a time period where he despaired of life. The ministry that he was engaged in was so challenging and so physically exhausting and so much risk of danger and harm and death that he was in a state of despair. Now, I gave you the example of, me training to run a duathlon. And when I go out and work out, if I spend 2 hours on the bike and I do the 24 miles, at the end of that, I'm fatigued. So my fatigue is not an indication that I've done something wrong. It's actually an indication that I'm doing something right. Because I'm working out, I'm exercising the body, and that causes fatigue. So, one of the things right away is when we see, especially a church leader or, a missionary, you hear about missionaries that come home on furlough for 6 months. We don't need to look at that as a negative thing. That's a positive thing. I mean, it can be taken as a positive thing. They're out there doing what God's told them to do, and it's fatiguing, and it wears them out, and they got to back up, and they got to come to a place of recuperation and rest. And our task is to be in tune enough to notice people who are doing what God's called them to do, and they're becoming weary or they're becoming fatigued, and we have the opportunity to come in like Aaron and Hur did with Moses. We have the opportunity to come in and support them and provide something that enables them to continue doing what God's called them to do. And that's a very valuable role. And part of it, I've said it before, is it's not likely that many of us are going to be in these fantastic lead ministry roles and recognized and known. It's not likely that many of us are going to be a Moses or a Paul or a David or a Joshua leading the battle. But we all have the opportunity, and maybe some of us will be, based on what God's calling you to do. But we all have the opportunity to play the support role. We all have the opportunity to pay attention and be able to come in and support somebody. And in the application time towards the end of the lesson, I want you guys to tell me about opportunities you've seen or opportunities you've had. Maybe even opportunities you didn't recognize at the time, but in hindsight, you're like, oh, I could have stepped in and helped, somebody with that. So even strong people become weary. Number 2, faithfulness notices a need. Paul tells us to pay attention. Philippians 2:4 is where he says, I'm paraphrasing, but he's basically saying, don't just look on your own needs, but look on the needs of others. Pay attention. That's our calling every day, to not be so consumed with our own need that we can't pay attention to others. So point number 2, faithfulness notices a need. Point number 3, supporting roles are essential. Moses could not have accomplished what God asked him to do if he did not have Aaron and Hur there to support him. Joshua could not have accomplished what God called him to do in the battle if Moses wasn't on the mountain holding up, and if Aaron and Hur weren't playing that support role, right? So it all had to play together. It all had to play together. The supporting roles are incredibly important. And oftentimes, the people in the very quiet supporting roles that never get any recognition are the key to what leads to the success of what God's doing through a church or through a ministry or through a missionary endeavor. So our task is to pay attention and understand that those supporting roles are essential. We don't need to be looking for the major lead roles. If God provides those opportunities, take them to be in the major lead role. But I think more often than not, what we need to be looking for is supporting roles, how to help others accomplish what God's called them to do. Healthy support strengthens rather than weakens. It strengthens rather than creates dependency. So there's ways to help that actually helps. There's ways to help that becomes more of a hindrance. And I've seen it, I share a lot about my experiences on the mission field in Uganda and Mexico. And it's just, I can tell you so many times I saw, and I'm just going to say, because it's my perspective, but American Christians who would come, you have a missionary on the field, you'd have some American Christian that gets interested in that ministry, and they're like, oh, I'm going to go help this missionary. And then they get on the field and become more of a hindrance to the missionary than a help, because they come there with their own, maybe their own ego or their own desire, their own emotional need they're trying to get met through, being on the mission field, all this junk. What's that? Agendas, and become more of a hindrance. So we have to be careful to make sure that we're not stepping in a situation for the purpose of helping somebody else, and we end up becoming more of a hindrance. So, you said that the word agenda that's it. If we're going to step in and help somebody, we have to adapt their agenda. We have to adopt their agenda. The first thing we have to do before we can help somebody is understand what they're trying to do. What is their calling? If you want to help a missionary, you can't just go down there and say, oh, I think you need to open up a church over in this area.
I don't think so.
You got to go down and spend some time with the missionary and say, where's God leading you? And let the missionary say, well, this is the vision. I think God's leading us to branch out in this part of this unreached area. And then I can say, okay, how can I help you do that? And then the missionary says, well, here's what the needs are. And then I can say, okay, you've listed 5 needs. I think maybe I can help you with one of those. You see how that flow happens?
I'm going to share something that kind of, I don't know if I should share it, but we were missionaries in Bolivia, South America, and Warren was building a school. He was not a preacher, not a well, he did teach boys third grade Sunday school. But his thing was not teaching anything. And the board wrote to us and said, we want Warren to minister and help preach and help teach. And he couldn't get Spanish. I'm telling you, he only knew the word hammer, nail, and, cement, or.
Yes.
And so, but we wrote back to and back then it took a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before a letter got
Right.
anywhere.
Right.
And then we said, listen, it's not his thing, teach and preach.
Yeah.
He's a builder, he came to build a school, etc. And you know what, though, they agreed with us.
Mm-hmm.
But I can see also sometimes when boards are not on the field, they don't know what's going on there.
Yeah.
Or if they think they know what's going on there. And another time Warren was sent to Costa Rica, I think it was Costa Rica or Puerto Rico, to see what was going on over there about.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm just saying, missionaries, we need to pray for them about circumstances that they have, just like you were saying.
Yeah.
Somebody will come along and say, hey, I think you should be doing it this way or that way.
Yeah.
Well,
That's not the way God's leading them,
That's my story.
Yep. So,
So,
all right.
The bottom line is, you have a handout from Jason listing the missionaries,
Uh-huh.
and it tells information and everything. And we need to be praying for these missionaries, and it's getting harder and harder, and more are getting killed.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So support strengthens and it doesn't weaken. Support strengthens and it doesn't hinder. If we're going to support anybody, we got to get in tune with where God's leading them, not where God's leading us. I don't need to go try to instill my vision on top of somebody else that I'm trying to help. I need to go understand, what is God leading you to do? Okay, what role can I play in helping you do that? So number 5, steady help continues until the work is done. Steady help is consistent. It comes in. It can be counted on. It can be relied on. Again, and I really don't want to focus on missions as the main point, because I think there's so many other parts of this, but it's just an easy example. If somebody's all fired up and they say missionary's got a vision for a school, somebody comes in and says, hey, I can help fund that school. I'm going to go fundraise, blah, blah, blah. And 2 months later, that fire's gone. That person disappears.
Or they
They moved on to another project. That's not helping the missionary at all, to come in and get fired up, get enthusiastic, make some commitments. The missionary's like, okay, now I've got somebody who's helping, and all of a sudden they lose their fire, so to speak, and they back out. So that's an obvious thing.
Sometimes it's not when it's complete. When
Mhm.
your part of it's complete.
Yes, right.
It's just like, I taught the senior class. You're still teaching it, but my part of it's finished.
Yeah.
I only support you as you teach.
Yes,
Not
exactly.
so there's.
Yeah.
We do that part that God gave us to do in that ministry.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's always that thing. One of the things that I did as chairman of the board this year was call William as our pastor. And I said, hey, I want to get together with you because I want to understand what your vision is for the church for this year. So as the chairman of the board, part of my responsibility is to get in tune with the pastor and where God's leading him, and then use my influence on the board to accomplish what the pastor sees, as a priority. As the chairman of the board, I could impose my will, and it could turn into a power struggle between me and the pastor. And I didn't want to approach it that way. I wanted to say, okay, You're the pastor. What is your vision? Now, one of the things that came out of that conversation was, let's deal with the parking lot. Right? Remember that? I wasn't all that in tune with the parking lot, but William was. And he said, hey, we need, when visitors pull up, one of the first things they see is a parking lot. Our parking lot's a mess. So what I did was I embraced that. Okay, that's part of what our pastor wants to accomplish. Let's make that happen. So,
That's what I was gonna say too. Anna, I don't know if she's back there, but she talked about a mission trip of our church to Mexico. And when the girls and I went down to Bolivia, we asked the pastor there, Pastor Dwight, my son, and we said, "What do you need? Where do you need help?"
mhm,
And he said, "I would like you to train our people how to do a good news club,
mhm.
how to teach children." And Donna and Darlene and I, when we went down there, that's what we did. We spent,
Yeah.
I think, 2 or 3 days with a session, and they came and they learned that.
All right, time's wrapping up. We got about 6 minutes. I want to change the focus of the discussion because right now everything we've talked about is missionaries on the field. We've talked about pastors, board, church leaders. I want to make this real. Get out of the ministry, get out of the organized ministry level, and get down to the real world. When you go to work every day, when you go to school, maybe you stay home all day long taking care of your kids. In that world, where does this apply? Where do you see people that have a calling of God that they're trying to accomplish that you personally can step in and play a supporting role?
Well, as a wife, my husband.
Yes. Great example.
First and foremost.
Yeah. I heard something, maybe I read it on Facebook somewhere, but it was a wife, and she made a comment, and she said, my husband fights battles all day long outside of this home. I don't want to be one of the battles he fights when he comes home. And I thought that's a fantastic perspective because she knows that her husband's out there in the world. And I use the term slaying dragons. I'll tell Sheila sometimes I'm going to slay my dragons. And and the wife recognized that. She recognized her husband's got all kinds of battles. He's out here fighting in the world. She doesn't want to be one of them. She wants to live in a way that the confrontation's not there in the home too. All right. So what else?
When we see somebody else struggling, instead of condemning them, we should be supporting. helping
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
If you find somebody in a fault, it says, look them up.
Yeah.
And bring them back instead of discouraging them.
Yeah. So you're saying somebody that's maybe straight off into sin. So somebody that's made some poor decisions.
Problems, financial problem, work problems.
Yeah.
We found out somebody we're close to lost their job.
Hey, I have another thing.
Okay. Hold on just a second.
I gotta say it right now. My computer got me a horrible, scary message. Who did I call? I called Frank.
Uh-huh.
Frank came right to my door within 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And he fixed it in about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
There's an example of a supporting
Yes.
in this church.
Yes, because you use your computer for ministry stuff, right? And your life and the Good News Club, I'm sure, and all that kind of stuff.
Anyway,
So Frank's
it's a good
supporting that.
example of it.
All right, tell me some of the others in your daily life. I mean, I've got a list of some, but I want to hear from you guys before I throw them out there. Who's out there that has a calling of God and they're trying to do that, and you see them, you interact with them, and you can play a supporting role?
I think Amy is one I try to support. She definitely ministers to other women.
Yes,
So, and that's just in her daily life.
yes. So she has a ministry to women, and you try to support her and help her in that. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I was going to say my children. Besides my husband, but my children have got children that are involved in things. And
Mm.
sometimes that means running back and getting a flash drive on Sunday
Yes.
morning because it got left at home, or
Yes.
it doesn't always have to be big things. It can be
Yes.
things too.
Yes.
And we have people who cannot drive for one reason.
Yeah.
Our opportunity to say, hey, I'll come pick you up, or you need to ride home.
Yeah. Yeah.
We all have, let's just have cars, we have time.
Yeah.
I think the breakfast is administered to outside people coming in a lot of times, not as much as it is to our church, but
Right.
when we have people who have children and stuff, and it can be hard enough just to get here with them, and then
Yes.
at least don't have to worry about breakfast. I think that's a great kind of outreach thing that we can do in a way as a
Right.
church, and we all put into that.
Right. Okay.
I'm the husband and the wife. I don't want to battle with myself.
Mm-hmm. All right. Here's some thoughts that I had. And I'm just thinking, as I thought now, who is it? I mean, everybody should have some calling from God. Every believer should be doing something that God's led them to do. But the major things we've already talked about: wives supporting husbands. Husbands have that same opportunity, because God calls husbands to things that the wife can support. God also calls the wife to things that the husband, if he's paying attention to, he can be a support in that.
I slay
But-
dragons at home.
Yes, yes,
There's lots of dragons at home.
yes. But here's one thing that came to my mind, and I'm not talking about relatives anymore. I'm going outside. Well, it's still in the church family, but could be outside the church family. But certainly outside my blood relatives, is just any young married couple. Any young married couple who's young in their marriage, and they're going to be
Period.
right, and they Christians, and they've committed to the Lord. They've come together in a spiritual union, committed to the Lord, and they're trying to figure out how can two become one. And you guys who are married know that's going to be a challenge, and it's a figure it out thing. So anytime that I can see a young married couple, anytime I have any opportunity to step in a supporting role and support their marriage, that's a good thing to do. That's a God-honoring thing to do that can help them figure out how to become one and honor God in that. The other thing is young families with children. And it's a double scenario. It's young moms with children who are trying to be moms. I mean, you moms know how overwhelming it can be to play that role. Young dads who are trying to be providers and take care of things. There's opportunities to step in. Now, I've done plenty of things wrong. And one thing we did wrong at a former church, Christmas time, we took up a bunch of gifts, and we found we had a bus ministry, so we already had kids that were coming in, many of them from disrupted homes, not all of them, but we interacted with the kids a lot. We did not interact with the parents a lot. Okay. So, and when we did interact with the parents, usually it was the mother. So we did this Christmas thing where we gather all these gifts and we put together little packages, and we knew within a family, okay, there's 2 boys and a girl. We knew their age. So we got age appropriate gifts, right? And then we went around as the church and we delivered these gift packages to these homes. And the kids knew that all the gifts came from the church. So these were families that wouldn't have much of a Christmas except that the church provided them. Now, what's wrong with that approach? We don't know who the dads are. And what we did was completely stepped into the dad role for that kid. The church became the dad. And what we were doing was teaching those kids to look to the church to be the dad. And while that's not, it's not just a blanket negative thing, because everything's situational, but you know what would have been a more effective approach? Find the dad and go to the dad of that family and say, we want to support you as the father of this family. We're gathering some gifts. We're going to give them to you, and we're going to let you give your kids Christmas gifts. Do you see the difference in the approach right there? That's how you empower a dad. That's how you empower parents to be parents instead of the church stepping in to take that role of the parent and teaching that child, right? Had we done that, do you think we would have gained some relationship with those dads? Those dads, I think, would have been blown away with that approach. They just, it would have given the opportunity for God to work in the father and empower him to be the father that God's called him to be. That's why I'm saying support strengthens, it doesn't weaken. What we did, I think, actually weakened that family structure.
Good intention.
Good intention. We just didn't realize what we were doing. And we stepped in there.
My hindsight's 20/20.
Yes. But do you agree with that assessment? Yeah. So one of the things we're talking about as the board is how do we reach the community that's around this church? I mean, we're all in agreement that as a church, we can do a better job of connecting with the people that, and I'm just going to say within 1 mile of this church, everybody that lives within 1 mile of this church should know that we exist, and they should know that we care about them.
Oh, I think they do.
Do you?
I do.
Okay.
Especially around in this neighborhood and like there's neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
with Ranch. I mean, I really think that this neighborhood especially
Okay.
does know about.
Well, that's, and we're well out of time again. But the point I was getting at is, as we work to develop outreach, as we work to figure out how to get in the community, we've got to do it in a way that strengthens the roles of mom and dad, and not subverts the role of mom and dad as we're trying to connect with the kids. You follow what I'm saying? So we'll just end with the challenge in your life. Every day you go, every day the people you interact with are totally different. I have no way of knowing all the dynamics there, but I encourage you to prayerfully ponder through some of these things that we've talked about today, and be aware and pay attention and look for people who are trying to do what God's called them to do. Look for the dads that are trying to be a dad. Look for the moms that are trying to be a mom. And figure out if there's a way that you can empower them to do that better. Look for the young wives that are trying to be a good wife. Look for the young husbands that are trying to be good husbands. And see if you can figure out a way that you can come in and support them and strengthen them in that role that God's given them. Look for the pastors. Look for the board people. Look for the Sunday school teachers. Look for the people that come in and do children's church. Look for the, you understand what I'm saying? In every aspect, be aware, pay attention to people who are making an effort to fulfill the role that God's put them in, and just see if there's some way that you can be a support. All right? Let's close. Father, thank you. Thank you for the challenges that you lay before us, and thank you for giving us hard things to wrestle through. And Father, may we never be guilty of attempting to understand these things on our own. Father, I just pray that as you challenge us with things and you call us to sort through and think, I pray that every one of those opportunities will just lead us back to you as the source of knowledge and wisdom and understanding and guidance, the source of light. And Father, we want to be a light. We want to be a stronger, more visible light in this community. And we want to represent you well in the world. We want you to work through us so that people see you and they're drawn to you. And those who don't know you will come to a saving faith in you. And Father, thank you for the opportunities that you give us to both take on lead roles as you ask us to do things, but also those supporting roles that are quiet, nobody ever knows. Thank you for those opportunities. Because you know, when we step up and we're faithful and nobody else knows anything about it, you know, and it's honoring to you when we take that approach. Father, give us wisdom as we make these decisions. Bless the rest of this day as we head to the worship service and your word that'll be shared there. Pray that you give us spiritual ears to hear and hearts to receive. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.